that you will be raped again. You know, it's a much more desperate situation. Like, it's irony to speak for an ordinary woman in Congo. For example, the Republic of Congo may be the site of the greatest catastrophe, humanitarian, that she lives in a post-traumatic. No, she lives in a permanent trauma. So there is a lot of things to do here, and I think, again, we need more than ever, not only social analysis, but social analysis linked with psychoanalysis, and against the background of this, to think about philosophy. If I may just add another thing, then I will stop. Why philosophy? Ah, you are the bad guy. Okay, I got it. My superego. No, okay. I know what would have happened. If you were to have a button there, you would press it now to stop me. No, I just wanted to say that things are changing so fast today that we have to think philosophically, even what does it mean to be a human being today? We don't even know, really know. Was this an applause or finally you are over? But, okay. Okay.
Tem uma questão, eu queria, se você pudesse desenvolver um pouco mais essa sua ideia da necessidade de recuperação do comunismo como categoria política, porque na sua primeira resposta você havia dito da necessidade de novas formas de ação coletiva enquanto uma tarefa política fundamental para hoje em dia. Você acredita que essas novas formas de ação política elas podem ser desenvolvidas no interior das estruturas institucionais da democracia liberal e parlamentar?
I would put it in this way: yes and no. I'm well aware of the danger of putting too much trust into this, what usually we cover with the term Porto Alegre, no? All this idea of self-organized local communities and so on and so on. There is a limit to that. We should never forget, as all radical leftists are well aware, that in order for all these local community movements to function, you usually need a state mechanism to guarantee the conditions and so on and so on. For me, the crucial, of course, we should not just sit down and say these local movements are irrelevant, because some leftist pessimists claim that all these local movements, they just, by treating some of the worst symptoms of capitalism, they ultimately just help the system to survive longer. So the idea is, let's sit back and wait for the big crisis. No, I don't agree with that. It's a catastrophe. If you wait for the big crisis, you basically get caught in this obsessional economy. You know, I know, because I'm one. You know how obsessional neurotics function. They wait all the time for some big event, but their whole enjoyment is in the fact that this big event is always postponed, no? I mean, many radical leftists today in the Western academia, they wait for the revolution, and in the meantime they quite enjoy their comfortable lives and so on. But nonetheless, we should also not be bad utopians in the sense of, oh, in local communities here, Zapatistas there, we already have it. The problem is more complex, and this is why, although I'm often critical of them, but political phenomena like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, even much more interesting for me, Morales in Bolivia, and my true hero, maybe, the one who was brutally deposed, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, Lavalas, the flood movement in Haiti. In a situation which may appear hopeless, total hegemony of capitalism and so on, what they did is not only rely on these local self-organized communities, but they tried to, with all the improvisation, to reinvent, to find, with all the experiments, of course we have failures, a new form of state which would somehow not only rely on standard political representation, but would be in a direct dialogue with these new movements. I think what we can do is this, but above all, my message would have been trust theory think. That is to say, I don't think we really even know where we are. We have many descriptions. First we have the old Marxists or liberals who claim, oh, it's just a new stage of capitalism or imperialism. Obviously not. Something new is emerging. But what? we have all these post-theories. We live in a post-industrial society, information society. I think these are still, how should I call them, journalistic phrases. We don't yet have what Frederick Jameson calls cognitive...
Professor?
Yes, okay. I will stop immediately.
Okay.
Cognitive mapping. So, to conclude, you will like this. Okay, now I ignore you. I turn to the boss directly. You know, old Marxists like this 11th thesis on Feuerbach. Philosophers have only interpreted the world. We have to also to change the world. What if today the first thing to do for a true leftist is the exact opposite? To say, maybe in the 20th century we tried to change the world too much. The task today is to step back and interpret it a little bit more.
Ok. Eu tentei interrompê-lo porque a Luísa me fez um sinal de que teria uma pergunta ligada ao assunto que você estava tratando.
Na verdade, uma pergunta do Natanael Araújo da Silva, de Cachoeira do Itapemirim, do Espírito Santo, que ele pergunta justamente, a gente está falando agora, citando essa questão da crise.
The name of a city.
Yes.
Yes.
No. The name of the city. Okay, sorry.
Another state. Como a filosofia pode ajudar a entender os períodos de crise, como da crise financeira pela qual o mundo passa? Ela pode ser útil?
That's a nice, brutal question, and I like this nice, like they say, like John McCain, whom I don't like, likes to say, no bullshit. No, they directly ask the question. No, it's a good question because first I must say, philosophy for me has clear limits. It's interesting how even people who criticize us somehow expect us. Maybe you, Vladimir, who are also a philosopher, noticed it. They expect us, nonetheless, to have an answer to everything. There was Iraq war. What do you think about it as a philosopher? There was tsunami in Indonesia. What do you think? Well, I don't know. But I can do something, which I think is also very important today. I cannot, as a philosopher, provide answers to questions. What I can do is to correct the question itself. The true problem today is not only that we don't have answers, is that often the way we perceive a problem, the way we formulate the problem, the way we formulate a question is already part of the problem. It's a mystification. For example, the example that I used yesterday at my talk all the time, tolerance. Everybody is, of course, for tolerance. I am not, because I claim that today tolerance is a mystifying category. Why? For example, did you notice how today when people fight racism, they automatically translate racism into a problem of tolerance? But for me, racism is not a problem of tolerance. Look at Martin Luther King. He never mentioned tolerance. For him, racism against the blacks was a problem of economic exploitation, racist laws, and so on. Today, people always, as if the problem is, you are, I don't know, I am black, you are white, how will we tolerate each other, and so on. This is ridiculous. Like, even more in feminism. It would be humiliating for a woman feminist to say, I want to be more tolerated by men. It's ridiculous. So why? The question, what I can do as a philosopher is to say, but why do we today automatically perceive racism as a problem of tolerance? Here comes the analysis. Because in our so-called, it's a wrong term, post-ideological, post-political society, economy is more and more, and politics a matter of administration, rational negotiation. So all the remaining conflicts are translated into problems of cultural conflict, cultural wars. So we